My family disinherited me for having a filthy career working with animals. The same family I saved from bankruptcy with $80,000 of my own money 4 years earlier. Easter Sunday, 2023. 47 relatives sat in silence as my father, Charles, announced that my younger brother, Matteo, would inherit 100% of Matthew's family enterprises. 3 generations of commercial real estate producing over $2 million a year. An empire that would have been foreclosed and erased if I hadn't wired them $80,000 on March 15, 2019. Henry's career path shows he's not family business material, Charles said, while my mother Margaret nodded in agreement. Working with filthy animals isn't what the Matthews name represents. Filthy animals. That's what they called my 4 veterinary clinics, my 23 employees, and my $800,000 in annual profit. What they didn't know yet was that while they were humiliating me in front of the entire family, I was already documenting everything. The bank records proving where my money went, the wire transfer they pretended to forget, the screenshots of Matteo's social media posts that cost me $45,000 in canceled contracts, the financial trail that would later force them to pay $259,000 in court-ordered damages. Because when you insult someone's life work as filthy while quietly using their money to protect your legacy, you're not just being cruel, you're creating evidence. They laughed because they thought I was powerless. They forgot about my money. I didn't forget a single receipt. And I was about to teach them how expensive that kind of amnesia can be. Growing up, the Matthews family business wasn't just a company, it was a religion. 3 generations of commercial real estate development, strip malls, office complexes, retail centers across 2 states. My grandfather built it from nothing in 1952. My father expanded it into a $2.3 million annual operation. And from the moment Matteo was born, everyone knew who would inherit the crown. The Matthews name meant something in our city. Prestige, respectability, old money reinforced by smart investments. We were the family that owned half the commercial properties downtown, the ones invited to charity galas, ribbon cuttings, and closed-door zoning meetings. The family whose opinions quietly shaped city council decisions. But working with animals was never respectable enough for the Matthews name. I discovered veterinary medicine in high school, volunteering at shelters and shadowing local vets. While Matteo prepared for business school, I learned how to suture wounds and diagnose infections. While he studied MBA case theory, I was learning how to keep living things alive with my own hands. By the time I was 30, I owned 4 veterinary clinics under the Whisker and Paw brand, 23 employees, $800,000 in annual profit. I'd built a business that rivaled our family company in revenue, employed more people than Matthews Enterprises, and served thousands of families across the region. Charles called it playing in the dirt with diseased creatures. Margaret smiled politely whenever I mentioned work, then redirected the conversation back to Matteo's real career. Matteo had been groomed for succession since birth. 28 years old with a Wharton MBA that cost the family $60,000. He'd never worked outside the family company, never built anything from scratch, never risked his own money on a single venture. His resume consisted entirely of Vice President of Development at Matthews Enterprises and the unspoken title of future owner. He was flawless at networking events and golf course conversations. He could charm investors and city planners effortlessly. But he'd never spent 16 hours straight in an operating room saving someone's beloved pet. Never comforted a child whose dog didn't survive surgery. Never built loyalty one grateful family at a time. In our family's eyes, Matteo was the future. I was just the walking wallet, the one they didn't respect but didn't hesitate to use. Part 3, Inciting Incident. March 12, 2019, 11:47 p.m. I was reviewing quarterly reports for Whisker and Paw when my phone rang. Margaret's name on the caller ID surprised me. My parents never called this late unless someone was in the hospital. "Henry, thank God you're awake." Her voice was strained, almost breathless. "We need to talk. It's about the family business." I set down my pen. In 30 years, Margaret had never once called me about the family business. That was Matteo's territory, Charles's domain. I was the son who worked with filthy animals. "What's going on, Mom?" "We're in trouble, real trouble. The company is losing $180,000 every quarter. Creditors are calling. Vendors want payment. The bank is threatening foreclosure on 3 properties." I walked into my home office and opened a notebook. Serious problems required documentation. How did it get this bad? Empty storefronts, broken leases, maintenance costs we couldn't keep up with. Your father won't admit it, but we're 6 weeks away from losing everything. There was a pause. Then she said the words I'd never heard before. We need a family member who understands real business. 3 days later, I sat across from Charles in his office, reviewing financial statements that were worse than Margaret had described. Matthew's family enterprises was bleeding cash. Emergency repairs, legal fees from tenant disputes. 2 anchor tenants had declared bankruptcy. How much do you need? I asked. 80,000, Charles said. Just enough to buy time, a bridge loan, 4% interest, promissory note, everything formal. I hesitated. This isn't a gift. No, he said quickly. This is a loan, proper paperwork. Our attorney will draft it. On March 15, 2019, I wired $80,000 to Matthews Family Enterprises, LLC. The agreement was signed, notarized, and filed. 4% annual interest, 18-month repayment term, late fees and default clauses spelled out in writing. Charles shook my hand and promised it was temporary. I trusted him. That decision would cost me everything and give me the evidence to take it all back. By Christmas 2019, you'd think that phone call in March had never happened. I arrived at the family holiday dinner expecting at least some acknowledgement, maybe a quiet thank you, a brief nod to the fact that I'd kept Matthew's enterprises alive. Instead, I watched Charles stand at the head of the table, raise his glass, and introduce Matteo as the sole heir to our family legacy, the future of Matthew's enterprises. Sole heir. 9 months earlier, that legacy had been 6 weeks from foreclosure, and the only reason it wasn't gone was sitting silently at the table, being politely ignored. I waited. Surely he'd mention the emergency loan, the bridge funding, the fact that Matthew's enterprises had survived because someone outside the golden child bubble stepped in. He didn't. Instead, Charles spoke at length about strategic restructuring and smart financial decisions. He praised Matteo's business instincts and natural leadership. He described the company's recovery as if the money had appeared by divine intervention. That was the first time I understood something important. They weren't just ungrateful, they were rewriting history in real time. 18 months passed. When the first loan payment came due, I sent Charles a polite reminder. Per the contract, Matthews Enterprises owed me $27,000 in principal plus interest. 3 days later, his reply arrived. Cash flow issues. We'll get caught up when business improves. Cash flow issues. As a creditor, I had the legal right to review their financials. I pulled the quarterly reports. Matthews Enterprises had just posted $340,000 in profit. They weren't struggling, they were thriving, and they were doing it with my $80,000 quietly erased from the narrative. I called Margaret. Mom, the loan is 6 months overdue. The contract clearly... Oh, honey, she cut in gently. Real family doesn't charge interest. We're not some bank, we're your parents. Real family doesn't charge interest. Interesting, considering she'd been sobbing about bankruptcy less than 2 years earlier. That's when Matteo escalated. At first, it was subtle. Facebook posts about family members who think they're better than everyone else. Instagram stories about humility and knowing your place. No names, but the implication was obvious. Then it turned explicit. Photos of himself in conference rooms with captions like, "While some people clean up poop for a living, others build real empires." A LinkedIn article followed, The Difference Between Real Business and Pet Projects. It picked up 47 likes from extended family, business partners, and people who mattered in our shared social circle. My favorite line came last. Some people mistake luck for skill. That was the moment everything crystallized. They hadn't just taken my money, they'd taken credit, denied obligation, and now felt comfortable humiliating me publicly, confident I'd stay quiet. They were wrong. 6 months later, Matteo's social media campaign started affecting my actual business. It began with a phone call from Peterson & Associates, a corporate client whose office buildings I'd been servicing for 3 years. They handled pest control contracts for several of my veterinary locations, a steady $45,000 a month. Henry, we're going to have to terminate our service agreement, their facilities manager said carefully. Is there an issue with our work? I asked. Service quality? Billing? No, nothing like that. It's just, we've heard some concerning things about your character. Nothing specific, but enough people have mentioned it that we feel it's best to move on. Concerning things about my character. I'd built Whisker and Paw over 10 years of ethical practice, community involvement, and a 96% customer satisfaction rating. No complaints, no disciplinary actions, no lawsuits. 2 weeks later, another corporate client ended their contract. Then another. By the end of the month, I'd lost 3 major accounts, over $60,000 in annual revenue. Every conversation sounded the same. We've heard things, it's probably nothing, but we don't want the association. That's when I started paying closer attention to what Mateo was doing online. The Reddit post appeared in mid-September on Arsh entitled People. The username was fake, but the writing style wasn't. The phrasing was familiar, the bitterness was unmistakable. My brother thinks saving animals makes him a saint, the post began. He's got this veterinary business he acts like makes him a hero, constantly bragging about money, employees, success compared to our family's real business. He's delusionally proud of what's basically a filthy career. Filthy career. The post hit 2,300 upvotes in 48 hours. Hundreds of comments followed, calling me arrogant, narcissistic, desperate for validation. Someone had included enough identifying details that anyone in our regional business community could connect it to Whisker and Paw. The top comment, with 847 upvotes, read, "Veterinarians who think they're better than everyone else are the worst. Dude, you clean up animal poop for a living." By November, the damage had moved beyond contracts. The state veterinary board contacted me regarding a character and fitness inquiry. An anonymous complaint alleged unprofessional conduct and ethical violations. No specifics, just enough to trigger an investigation that would take months, require legal counsel, and place my license under scrutiny. Within the same week, 2 senior technicians resigned. Both cited reputation concerns. These were people I'd trained personally, professionals who trusted me with complex surgical cases. My quarterly revenue dropped from an average of $200,000 to $122,000. This wasn't online trash talk anymore. It was coordinated, targeted, measurable. That was the moment I understood something crucial. Mateo wasn't venting. He wasn't lashing out emotionally. He was deliberately eroding my credibility. Client by client, platform by platform, while hiding behind anonymity and plausible deniability. This wasn't sibling rivalry. It was systematic destruction. And for the first time, I stopped documenting the damage for my own records and started documenting it for a courtroom. That brings us back to Easter Sunday, 2023. 47 family members watching Charles announce Mateo's inheritance. The same relatives who'd heard about my concerning character through Mateo's whisper campaigns. The same people who'd watched me get systematically excluded from family business conversations while my money quietly kept that business alive. "Henry's career path shows he's not family business material," Charles said, gesturing toward Mateo with obvious pride. "Working with filthy animals isn't what the Matthews name represents." I sat there for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. 4 years of financial support, 18 months of unpaid debt, 2 years of coordinated character assassination. All of it distilled into a single sentence, spoken confidently in front of everyone. That's when I stopped being polite. "Charles," I said, loud enough for the table to hear, "I have a question about family business." The room went quiet. "So, what about it?" he asked, already irritated. I reached into my jacket and unfolded a single page. "Do you remember March 15th, 2019? His expression shifted, just slightly. "That's the day I wired $80,000 to Matthews Family Enterprises to keep it out of foreclosure," I continued. "This is the bank record. Without this transfer, there wouldn't be a family business for Mateo to inherit." The silence became uncomfortable. Margaret tried to interrupt. "Henry, this isn't the time." "Actually, it is," I said evenly, "because if my career is so filthy, I'd like to know why my money was clean enough to save your legacy." Charles's face flushed. "That was a loan. We've been paying it back." "Really?" I opened my banking app. "Because you're currently 28 months behind. With interest, the balance is $87,000. Chairs shifted, forks stopped moving. "But that's not the only issue," I said, standing so everyone could see me. "While you've been avoiding repayment, Mateo has been busy elsewhere." I scrolled through the folder on my phone. Facebook posts about family members who think they're better than everyone else. Instagram stories about people who clean up poop for a living. A LinkedIn article titled, "The Difference Between Real Business and Pet Projects." Mateo didn't say a word. "And then there's Reddit," I added. "A post describing me as delusionally proud of a filthy career. That one received 2,300 upvotes and cost me $60,000 in lost contracts. I had 47 screenshots saved, time-stamped, archived, preserved. Digital forensics traced every anonymous account back to Mateo's devices. What surprised me wasn't shock. It was the silence. No one defended him, no one laughed it off, no one tried to reframe it as misunderstanding or sibling rivalry, because this wasn't emotion, it was documentation. Aunt Linda avoided my eyes. One cousin quietly pulled out their phone, not to record me, but to look up the post. Someone else asked, barely audible, "Are those numbers real?" "They're conservative," I replied. Charles opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time, he had no story prepared, no authority to hide behind. No version where this ended, with him in control. "I'm done discussing this here," I said, sliding my phone back into my pocket. "My attorney will handle the rest." That was the moment it stopped being a family argument and became litigation. The Monday after Easter, I called Sarah Chen at Chen & Associates. She specialized in defamation cases and family business litigation, with an 87% success rate over 15 years of practice. Her consultation fee was $450 per hour, but after spending the weekend documenting everything Mateo had cost me, I considered it an investment. Sarah reviewed my evidence for 2 hours without saying much. Bank records, wire transfers, social media screenshots, business financial statements, the promissory note Charles had signed and ignored. When she finally looked up from the paperwork, she was smiling. "They handed you a perfect case with a bow on top," she said. "Unpaid debt, documented defamation, quantifiable business losses, and a clear pattern of bad faith conduct. This isn't just winnable, it's textbook." She explained that we could pursue multiple claims: breach of contract for the unpaid loan, defamation for the social media campaign, and intentional interference with business relationships for the lost contracts. The total damages, including interest, legal fees, and future lost revenue, would likely exceed $250,000. "What are the risks?" I asked. "Honestly, very few. Your documentation is exceptional and their behavior created an obvious paper trail. The only real risk is that they'll try to settle quickly to avoid public embarrassment." She was right. 3 weeks later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Matthews and Partners Law Group. Charles had hired representation. "Mr. Matthews, this is David Kellerman, representing your family's business interests. We understand there's been some miscommunication regarding financial arrangements." Miscommunication. That was a creative way to describe 18 months of ignored loan payments and 2 years of character assassination. "We're prepared to offer $25,000 to resolve this matter completely," he continued. "No admission of wrongdoing, standard non-disclosure agreement, everyone moves forward." $25,000, less than a third of what they actually owed, with no acknowledgement of the business damage Mateo had caused, and a non-disclosure agreement to make sure I could never tell anyone what had really happened. "That's not going to work," I said. "Mr. Matthews, litigation is expensive and unpredictable. Family disputes can drag on for years. Our offer represents a reasonable compromise that avoids unnecessary publicity." Unnecessary publicity? They were worried about their reputation finally catching up with their behavior. "Your client owes me $87,000 in unpaid loans," I replied. "Add the lost business revenue, legal fees, and punitive damages for defamation, and we're talking about over $250,000. Your offer isn't a compromise, it's an insult." Kellerman tried a different angle. "Your demands seem vindictive and unreasonable. Surely we can find middle ground that serves everyone's interests." I hung up. Sarah filed the lawsuit the following week. Within 10 days, we received a court order requiring Matthews Family Enterprises to produce all financial records from 2019 to 2023, along with complete access to all social media accounts and devices used by family members. As Sarah explained what discovery would uncover, I understood the real cost of what I'd just set in motion. This wasn't just about money anymore. Once those records were opened, there would be no quiet resolution. No version of events where my parents could pretend this was a misunderstanding, or where Mateo could spin himself as misunderstood. Families don't come back from discovery. I knew this would permanently fracture what little remained between us. Holidays would end, neutral ground would disappear. Any illusion of reconciliation would die under sworn testimony and court transcripts. And I accepted that. Because the version of family peace they were offering had always required my silence, my money, and my reputation. I wasn't willing to pay that price anymore. The court ordered them to produce every financial record, every post, every deleted message. 6 months later, we were in County Superior Court with Judge Morrison presiding. The gallery was packed, not just with extended family, but with business associates, community leaders, and local reporters who'd caught wind of a Matthews family legal dispute. Charles and Margaret sat in the front row, behind their attorney's table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen them. Mateo was beside them, fidgeting with his phone until the bailiff told him to put it away. This wasn't a private family argument anymore. This was public record, open court, with everyone they'd ever tried to impress watching their dirty laundry get aired systematically. Sarah stood at the plaintiff's table, organized and confident. She'd spent months preparing for this moment, and it showed in every document, every exhibit, every calculated question. "Your Honor," she began, "this case involves a clear pattern of financial exploitation and defamation designed to destroy my client's business while denying his legitimate role in saving the defendant's company." The evidence presentation took 4 hours. Exhibit A, the wire transfer receipt from March 15, 2019, $80,000, verified by bank records, witnessed by notarized loan documents, with clear repayment terms that had been systematically ignored. Exhibit B through H, screenshots of social media posts, Facebook attacks, Instagram stories, LinkedIn articles, Reddit threads. Every platform where Mateo had systematically destroyed my reputation while hiding behind fake usernames and anonymous accounts. Exhibit 1, Digital Forensics, report tracing IP addresses, device signatures, and posting patterns back to Mateo's personal devices. No ambiguity, no deniability, technical proof that every attack came from him. Exhibits J through Q, business financial statements showing the direct correlation between Mateo's online campaign and my lost revenue. Contracts terminated, client relationships ended, revenue dropping from $60,000 monthly to $37,000 as my reputation deteriorated. Exhibit R, independent business valuation showing long-term damage to Whisker & Paw's market position and future earning potential. The financial expert testified for 2 hours, walking through spreadsheets that calculated total damages at $259,000, lost revenue, unpaid debt, legal fees, and compensation for ongoing reputation damage. Mateo's lawyer had no questions. Charles took the stand and tried to minimize everything. The loan was just family helping family. The social media posts were sibling rivalry blown out of proportion. The business damage was probably unrelated. Sarah destroyed him methodically. "Mr. Matthews, when you called your son's career filthy at Easter dinner, were you referring to the same business that generated the money you used to save Matthews Enterprises?" "That's not..." "Yes or no?" "Yes." "And when you said working with animals wasn't what the Matthews name represents, were you aware that his clinics employed more people and generated comparable revenue to your company?" Charles couldn't answer. Mateo's testimony was worse. Sarah made him read his own words out loud. "Did you write this Reddit post describing your brother as delusionally proud of a filthy career?" "Yes." "And this Facebook post?" "Yes." By the time she was finished, Mateo had admitted to 47 separate defamatory posts. As Mateo's final admission echoed through the courtroom, the gallery no longer sounded like a neutral audience. It sounded like a funeral. Cousin Laura, who had shared Mateo's posts for months, covered her mouth. 2 of Charles's longtime business partners were whispering while pulling up the Reddit thread on their phones. I recognized one of them, the same man who had canceled a Whisker & Paw lease after reading those accusations. Margaret finally looked at me. Not with anger, not with judgment, with recognition. She was realizing, in front of everyone, that they hadn't just insulted me. They had financially bled the son who kept them alive. Charles shifted in his chair, no longer looking like the patriarch of Matthews Enterprises. Just a man watching his reputation evaporate line by line on a courtroom projector. A woman from our church leaned forward to whisper something to her husband. Another family friend shook his head. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about who they really were, and how many people had finally seen it. Judge Morrison didn't deliberate long. "This case represents a textbook example of bad faith," she said. "The defendants borrowed money in an emergency, used it to stabilize their business, then refused repayment while launching a coordinated attack on their creditor's professional reputation. The judgment was comprehensive, $259,000 in damages, interest, court costs, a permanent injunction against further defamatory statements, and a court-ordered public apology to be posted on every platform Mateo had used. "Actions have consequences," Judge Morrison said, looking directly at Charles and Mateo. Within a week, the story had spread through the local business community. The Veterinary Association issued a statement supporting my integrity. 3 former clients called to reinstate contracts. The Regional Business Journal ran a feature, "Local Vet Wins David versus Goliath Family Case." The certified check arrived 28 days later. $259,000 drawn from Matthews Family Enterprises' primary business account. No note, no apology, no attempt at reconciliation, just payment in full, exactly as the court had ordered. I deposited it that afternoon. I changed my phone number that evening. Over the next few months, there were attempts to reach me. Christmas cards with no return address, flowers delivered to my office with notes about healing as a family, and moving past our differences. A cousin called to say Charles was having health problems and really wanted to talk. I didn't respond to any of it, not out of anger, but because I finally understood something important. The version of family peace they were offering had always required my silence, my money, and my willingness to be treated as less. It required me to pretend the family business didn't include the business that had actually saved them. Some relationships don't survive honesty. That isn't always a tragedy. Matthews Family Enterprises didn't collapse in some dramatic headline. It simply ran out of places to hide. After the lawsuit went public, their credit lines were pulled. Long-term tenants quietly ended leases. Brokers stopped returning Charles's calls. The Matthews name, once enough to close any deal in town, became radioactive. Investors avoided them, business partners distanced themselves, and the same people who once toasted Charles at charity galas now crossed the street to avoid him in grocery stores. They lost the only thing that ever really mattered to them, their standing. 2 years later, Whisker and Paw had expanded to 6 locations across 3 counties. Sarah Chen, the one person who stood beside me when everyone else chose comfort over truth, eventually became Sarah Matthews after we married in a small ceremony surrounded by people who actually respected what I'd built. We bought a home with enough land for the rescue animals we foster, building a life that feels honest instead of performative. I never saw Charles or Margaret again. Mateo moved to another state, apparently finding our shared business community too small after the court case. The family he once controlled with reputation and whispers had nothing left to give him. Sometimes former clients ask if I regret breaking up the family over money. They don't understand that the family was already broken. I just stopped pretending otherwise. My real family now is made of people who celebrate my success instead of resenting it, who understand that working with animals isn't filthy, it's meaningful, who would never take my money with one hand while publicly questioning my worth with the other. They learned something important in that courtroom. You can't treat someone like a walking wallet while calling their life's work worthless. You can't build your legacy on someone else's sacrifice while denying their place in it. Sometimes the true consequence of your choices is losing people who never valued you at all.